William Henry Harrison. The Brief Flame. On February 9, 1773, in the heart of Charles City County, Virginia, a baby boy was born into the American Revolution. His name was William Henry Harrison, and he came from one of Virginia's most distinguished families. His father, Benjamin Harrison V, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Young William grew up among the ideals of liberty and governance, surrounded by the echoes of revolution and the weight of expectation. Though originally intended for medicine, fate had other plans for this restless, determined soul. In 1791, Harrison joined the U.S. Army and quickly distinguished himself in the Northwest Indian War, serving under General Anthony Wayne. His leadership and bravery helped secure American control of the Northwest Territory, earning him recognition and promotions. He married Anna Toothill Simms, the daughter of a prominent judge, and together they would have 10 children. But it was Harrison's role as governor of the Indiana Territory that made his name known across the young nation. As governor, Harrison negotiated land deals with Native American tribes, many of them controversial and contested. Tensions escalated until 1811, when Harrison led U.S. forces against Tecumseh and his confederation at the Battle of Tippecanoe. It was a hard-fought victory that cemented Harrison's reputation as a frontier hero. Tippecanoe and Tyler too would later become the most famous campaign slogan in American history. His fame only grew during the War of 1812, where he commanded U.S. forces in the Northwest, defeated British troops and native allies at the Battle of the Thames, and secured the region for the United States. He was hailed as a national hero. After the war, Harrison retired to his farm in North Bend, Ohio, but the call of politics proved too strong. He served as a congressman, senator, and minister to Columbia, often advocating for Western expansion and veterans' rights. He was a quiet statesman, not known for soaring rhetoric, but for his sense of duty and service. As tensions over slavery and states' rights simmered, Harrison emerged as a unifying figure, a war hero without deep political entanglements. In 1840, the newly formed Whig Party chose Harrison to run for president against Martin Van Buren. They crafted a brilliant campaign portraying Harrison as a humble frontiersman living in a log cabin, drinking hard cider, and speaking for the common man. In truth, Harrison came from privilege, but the image stuck. With parades, songs, buttons, and slogans, the Whigs energized voters like never before. Tippecanoe and Tyler too became a rallying cry across the country. Harrison won by a landslide. On March 4, 1841, William Henry Harrison was sworn in as the 9th President of the United States. At 68, he was the oldest man ever elected to the office at the time. Determined to appear strong and vigorous, he delivered a 2-hour inaugural address, the longest in history, in freezing rain without a coat or hat. A month later, he was dead. Harrison fell ill just weeks into his term, initially believed to be pneumonia, though later studies suggest typhoid fever from contaminated water near the White House. He died on April 4, 1841, just 31 days after taking office. His presidency remains the shortest in American history. His death set a vital constitutional precedent. Vice President John Tyler assumed the full powers of the presidency, establishing the rule of presidential succession that remains today. Though his presidency was brief, the impact of his passing would shape the nation's understanding of executive power. William Henry Harrison was the first president to die in office. His passing shocked the nation and sparked debate, but it also unified the country in grief. He was remembered not just for what he might have done as president, but for a life of military valor, public service, and gentle humility. He had lived a full life and died at the highest point of public trust. Though his presidency was a flicker, his influence was felt for decades. His grandson, Benjamin Harrison, would later become the 23rd president. His campaign style helped usher in the age of modern electioneering. His succession crisis helped clarify the Constitution's silence on presidential death. He was not a philosopher or visionary, but a soldier, a father, and a reluctant politician who served when called. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, imagine a man in a log cabin, sipping cider, a saber from Tippecanoe hanging above the hearth. Picture him riding into the rain on Inauguration Day, proud, hopeful, unaware that history would remember him more for how briefly he stood than how long he fought. Because William Henry Harrison believed in duty above comfort, he gave his all, even if for just 1 month. John Tyler, the accidental president. On March 29, 1790, in the rolling fields of Charles City County, Virginia, a baby boy was born into a family steeped in American tradition. His name was John Tyler, and like his predecessor William Henry Harrison, he was born into the world of Virginia aristocracy and revolution. His father, John Tyler Sr., was a judge, governor, and close ally of Thomas Jefferson. From an early age, young John was fed a steady diet of states' rights, classical education, and Southern pride. He graduated from the College of William and Mary at just 17 and became a lawyer by 19. But his true passion? Politics. Tyler quickly climbed the political ladder, serving in the Virginia State Legislature, then the U.S. House of Representatives, and eventually as governor of Virginia and U.S. Senator. He was a staunch advocate for states' rights, wary of centralized federal power, and often stood alone, voting on principle rather than party line. This independence earned him both admiration and isolation. Though once a Democrat, he grew disenchanted with Andrew Jackson's forceful presidency and joined the Whig Party, a strange fit, but one that would shape his destiny. In 1840, the Whigs nominated war hero William Henry Harrison for president, and, needing to balance the ticket with a Southern statesman, chose John Tyler as his running mate. The campaign was a spectacle. Log cabins, cider barrels, and the immortal slogan, Tippecanoe and Tyler too. It worked. Harrison won by a landslide, and Tyler became Vice President of the United States. Little did anyone know he'd be president within a month. When Harrison died just 31 days into his presidency, the nation was thrown into confusion. The Constitution was vague. Was Tyler acting president or the new president? Tyler made his position clear. He was fully and officially the president. He took the oath, moved into the White House, and began exercising presidential powers. Some mocked him as his accidency, but he stood firm. By asserting his right to the office, Tyler set a crucial precedent for presidential succession that would guide the nation for centuries. Once in office, Tyler clashed with the Whig Party almost immediately. He vetoed their plans to re-establish a national bank, infuriating party leaders, including Henry Clay. The Whigs expelled him from the party, the only U.S. president to lose the support of the party that elected him. His cabinet resigned, all but Secretary of State Daniel Webster, and Congress attempted to impeach him. Tyler was a man without a party, governing alone. And yet he pressed on. Tyler's greatest achievements came in foreign policy. He signed the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, resolving border disputes with Britain, pushed for trade with China, sending the USS John Adams and USS Columbia to open diplomatic relations, advocated for the annexation of Texas, a move that would later ignite sectional tensions but also expand American territory. He believed in a bold, expanding America, though his methods often ignited controversy. During his presidency, Tyler's beloved wife, Letitia Christian Tyler, died, making her the first Lady to die in the White House. A year later, Tyler stunned Washington by marrying Julia Gardner, a 24-year-old socialite 30 years his junior. They became the first presidential couple to marry while in office. Together they had 7 children, on top of the 8 he had with Letitia. In total, Tyler fathered 15 children, more than any other U.S. president. Tyler saw the annexation of Texas as his crowning goal. Though rebuffed by Congress at first, he worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Just before leaving office in 1845, Tyler secured a joint resolution to admit Texas as a state, fueling expansion but also deepening the divide between North and South over slavery. It was a final flourish from a man few had expected to lead. After leaving office, Tyler returned to Sherwood Forest Plantation in Virginia. But when Southern states seceded in 1861, Tyler's allegiance remained with his native South. He opposed war but ultimately joined the Confederate Congress, becoming the only former U.S. president to take such a step. He died before taking his seat on January 18, 1862. In the North, his death was ignored. In the South, he was buried with honors. John Tyler defied party lines, broke expectations, and rewrote constitutional precedent. He was a president who wasn't supposed to be, and yet reshaped the office forever. Some call him stubborn. Some call him principled. But all agree he mattered. His story is one of unexpected power, lonely leadership, and quiet determination. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, picture a man walking alone through the halls of the White House, knowing the nation doubts him, but leading anyway. Imagine a quill scratching out letters to foreign dignitaries, a mind burning with plans to secure borders, broker peace, and expand a fledgling union. Because John Tyler believed in the Constitution above all else, the presidency endured. even when the world was unsure how. James K. Polk, the relentless visionary. On November 2nd, 1795, in a log cabin in Pineville, North Carolina, a boy was born who would one day redraw the map of a nation. His name was James Knox Polk. And from humble frontier roots, he would rise to become one of the most determined and underrated presidents in American history. Sickly as a child and often in pain due to gallstones, young James underwent surgery at age 17 without anesthesia. The pain would mark him, but so would the toughness he developed from surviving it. He was quiet, focused, and serious. His mother instilled in him deep religious values, while his father encouraged ambition. Polk graduated from the University of North Carolina with high honors and a reputation for sharp debate. After studying law in Tennessee under Felix Grundy, he opened a legal practice and quickly entered politics. He was elected to the Tennessee legislature and in 1825 to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he would serve for 14 years. Polk was a staunch Jacksonian Democrat, devoted to Andrew Jackson's vision of limited government, expansionism, and populism. He rose to become Speaker of the House, the only president in history to have held that role. After a brief stint as governor of Tennessee, Polk seemed to vanish from the political spotlight until 1844, when the Democratic National Convention found itself deadlocked. With Martin Van Buren unable to secure enough support due to his opposition to the annexation of Texas, and no clear alternative, a compromise emerged. James K. Polk. He was dubbed the Dark Horse candidate, unexpected, unassuming, but perfectly poised. He ran on a platform of annexing Texas, asserting American claims over the Oregon Territory, and acquiring California from Mexico. He promised to serve only one term, but to get things done. He won. Polk entered the White House in 1845 with a laser-sharp agenda: lower tariffs to promote trade, establish an independent treasury, settle the Oregon boundary with Britain, acquire California and the Southwest from Mexico. Most presidents dream. Polk acted. He worked tirelessly, often late into the night, reading every bill, writing his own speeches, and maintaining a punishing schedule. Even his cabinet members struggled to keep up. He was intense, precise, and disciplined, a man of few words but fierce results. Within months, Polk had re-established the independent treasury system, passed the Walker Tariff, one of the lowest in American history, negotiated the Oregon Treaty with Britain, setting the boundary at the 49th parallel. But his most dramatic and controversial achievement came in the West. In 1845, Texas was annexed into the Union, sparking tensions with Mexico, which still claimed the territory. Polk sent troops to the disputed border, and when Mexican forces attacked, war was declared. The Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, was one of Polk's most defining chapters. Critics called it a war of aggression. Polk defended it as a matter of national honor and destiny. U.S. forces under Generals Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott captured key cities, including Mexico City. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 granted the U.S. more than 500,000 square miles of territory, including California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and parts of Colorado and Nevada. In just 4 years, Polk had added more land to the U.S. than any other president. True to his promise, Polk did not seek re-election. He had set goals, achieved them, and left office exhausted. But the consequences of his expansion were profound. The new territories reignited debates over slavery, setting the stage for the Civil War. Though he had accomplished more in one term than many presidents did in 2, his legacy was complicated. He returned to Tennessee, finally free to rest. Just 3 months after leaving office, James K. Polk died of exhaustion and illness on June 15, 1849, at age 53. He had worked himself to the bone, giving his life to the presidency. His wife, Sarah Childress Polk, would live for another 42 years, fiercely guarding his legacy. He was buried at his Nashville home, and later moved to the grounds of the Tennessee state capitol. Polk is rarely listed among the most famous presidents, but historians admire him for being the rare politician who kept his promises. He was methodical, fearless, and effective, yet not without controversy. His expansionist policies fulfilled the dream of manifest destiny, but deepened divisions that would nearly destroy the Union. Still, he reshaped the United States forever. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, imagine a man hunched over a desk lit by candlelight, scribbling plans to push borders westward, to balance budgets, and to secure a young nation's destiny. Picture him standing at the map of North America, imagining a United States that stretched from sea to shining sea, and then making it real. Because James K. Polk believed in action over applause, he changed the course of a continent. Zachary Taylor, the soldier in the saddle. On November 24, 1784, in a small log cabin in Orange County, Virginia, a baby boy was born who would spend most of his life on horseback. His name was Zachary Taylor, and though no one could have guessed it then, he would ride from the wild frontiers of early America all the way to the White House. Shortly after his birth, the Taylor family moved to Kentucky, settling near the banks of the Ohio River. It was rough country, full of danger, promise, and the spirit of westward expansion. Zachary grew up strong, rugged, and unpolished. He received only a basic education, but he was tough, loyal, and fearless. In 1808, Taylor joined the U.S. Army as a first lieutenant, not for fame or glory, but out of duty. What began as a modest commission became a military career spanning 4 decades. He fought in the War of 1812, the Black Hawk War, the Second Seminole War. But it was during the Mexican-American War that Taylor truly rose to national prominence. With his gruff demeanor, plain speech, and love for simple comforts, soldiers called him Old Rough and Ready. He led from the front, slept in tents with his men, and earned their unwavering loyalty. In 1846, as war erupted with Mexico, Taylor was placed in command of U.S. forces. He won crucial victories at Palo Alto, Resaca de la Palma, Monterrey. But it was the Battle of Buena Vista in 1847 that made him a legend. Outnumbered and outgunned, Taylor held his ground against a larger Mexican army under General Santa Anna. His defiant message to Washington became famous: "I shall win or die." He won. The American public adored him. Without seeking it, Zachary Taylor had become a national hero. Taylor had never voted in a presidential election. He had no political experience. He wasn't even sure which party he belonged to. And yet in 1848, the Whig Party nominated him for president. His war record, honesty, and non-partisan image made him the perfect candidate for a nation tired of party squabbles. He won the election, defeating Lewis Cass and Martin Van Buren, and became the 12th President of the United States. "I am a Whig, but not an ultra-Whig," he said, true to his independent streak. Taylor took office in March 1849 and almost immediately faced the brewing storm of sectional conflict over slavery and new territories acquired after the Mexican-American War. California applied for statehood as a free state, angering Southern leaders who feared a loss of power. Though Taylor was a slaveholder, he opposed the expansion of slavery into the new territories. He threatened to use military force against any state that tried to secede. "Disunion is treason," he declared. His stance shocked the South and reshaped the narrative of who Zachary Taylor truly was. On July 4, 1850, after attending Independence Day ceremonies in scorching heat, Taylor returned to the White House, ate raw fruit and cold milk, and fell violently ill. Within 5 days, he was dead. July 9, 1850. The cause of death remains debated: cholera, acute gastroenteritis, or something darker. But what's clear is this: Zachary Taylor's presidency lasted only 16 months. He was the second president to die in office. Though brief, Taylor's presidency revealed a man of principle, willing to stand against powerful interests to preserve the Union. He had no taste for politics, but he loved his country. His unexpected death paved the way for Millard Fillmore, who had signed the Compromise of 1850. Some believe Taylor would have opposed it. His family buried him in Louisville, Kentucky, where his tomb still stands. Zachary Taylor wasn't polished, he wasn't poetic, but he was honest, brave, and loyal to the men he led and the country he served. He spent more time in tents than in parlors, more years on horseback than in debate. And when called to lead, he didn't hesitate. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, imagine a dusty soldier with sun-leathered skin, sitting by a campfire, jacket undone, sword resting beside him. Picture him rising to lead men into battle, then later rising to lead a fractured nation with the same grit and quiet resolve. Because Zachary Taylor believed in doing what was right, not what was easy, he earned the trust of a nation. Millard Fillmore, the gentleman from Buffalo. On a snowy winter night, January 7th, 1800, in a modest log cabin nestled in the hills of Cayuga County, New York, a boy was born into poverty and hardship. His name was Millard Fillmore, and though the world he entered was cold and unadorned, he would rise to stand beneath the great dome of the U.S. Capitol as the 13th President of the United States. His father, Nathaniel Fillmore, was a tenant farmer, and young Millard grew up knowing the bitter edge of poverty. There were no tutors, no polished manners, no famous family name, only a love of books, a desire to learn, and the slow burning ambition of a boy who refused to stay small. He was mostly self-educated, teaching himself by the light of a fireplace and borrowing every book he could find. He apprenticed as a clothmaker and later studied law, scraping together enough money to attend New Hope Academy and later become a lawyer in Buffalo, New York. His life was not destined, it was carved from hardship with stubborn hands. In Buffalo, Fillmore quickly became respected for his diligence, modesty, and fairness. He was soft-spoken, courteous, and exacting. He married his childhood sweetheart, Abigail Powers, a school teacher just as serious-minded and bookish as he was. Together they built a home of quiet learning and mutual ambition. In 1828, Fillmore was elected to the New York State Assembly, and in 1832 to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served multiple terms. A member of the Whig Party, he supported economic modernization, the American system, and internal improvements like roads and canals. He was no firebrand. He was a listener, a negotiator, a man who preferred thoughtful compromise to bold declarations. But in a time of brewing storm, that gentle temperament would become both his strength and his burden. After Congress, Fillmore served as New York State Comptroller, introducing accountability and reform to public finance. He also helped found the University at Buffalo, later serving as its first chancellor. Education to him was not only a ladder, it was a legacy. In 1848, the Whigs nominated Zachary Taylor, the war hero, for president. To balance the ticket with a northerner and a moderate, they selected Millard Fillmore as vice president. The combination was unusual, a rugged general and a quiet legalist. Yet it worked. They won the election. As vice president, Fillmore had little influence. Taylor largely ignored him, but everything changed when President Taylor died unexpectedly in July 1850, thrusting Fillmore into the highest office of the land. The nation he inherited was on the brink of collapse. The debate over slavery in the new territories had reached a boiling point. California wanted to join as a free state. Southerners threatened secession. Congress was in deadlock. Fillmore, the accidental president, stood at the center of it all, holding a fragile union in trembling hands. To many, Millard Fillmore will always be remembered for signing the Compromise of 1850, a package of laws meant to calm the fury between North and South. California entered as a free state. The slave trade, but not slavery itself, was abolished in Washington, D.C. Utah and New Mexico were organized as territories with no restriction on slavery. The Fugitive Slave Act was passed, mandating the return of escaped slaves to their owners, even from free states. Fillmore believed the compromise would save the Union. He called it the final settlement of slavery's expansion. He signed all its components, including the Fugitive Slave Act, though he did so with heavy reluctance. Many in the North never forgave him for it. The compromise temporarily quieted secessionist talk, but polarized the country further. Northern abolitionists burned Fillmore in effigy. Southern radicals distrusted him anyway, and the Whig Party, already divided, began to fracture beyond repair. Yet Fillmore remained firm. He believed in the Constitution above politics, the Union above parties, and peace above ideology. He modernized the White House, strengthened the Navy, and sent Commodore Matthew Perry to Japan, laying the groundwork for future trade relations with Asia. These foreign affairs would not bear fruit in his time, but he planted the seeds nonetheless. In 1852, Fillmore failed to gain the Whig nomination, losing to Winfield Scott. The Whigs lost the election, and the party all but collapsed. In 1856, Fillmore returned once more, this time as the candidate for the Know-Nothing Party, a short-lived movement built on nativism and opposition to immigration. He ran not to win, but to restore order and balance. He only won Maryland, but his presence in the race split votes and foreshadowed the rise of the Republican Party. After that, Fillmore retired from politics for good. Fillmore's later years were spent in Buffalo, where he became a beloved civic leader. He founded libraries, served on hospital boards, and helped rebuild the city after a devastating fire. His beloved Abigail had died while he was president. In 1858, he married Caroline Carmichael, a well-educated widow. He died on March 8, 1874, at the age of 74. By then, the Civil War had come and gone. The compromise he once hoped would save the nation had only delayed the inevitable. Millard Fillmore was not a visionary or a warrior. He did not light fires. He tried to quiet them. He was a man of books, law, and balance. A man who rose from poverty to the presidency with no help but his own mind and effort. He is remembered with complexity, even controversy. But behind the compromise was a man trying desperately to hold a nation together. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, picture a small house in Buffalo, warmed by a fireplace. Inside, a quiet man with silver hair is bent over a book, reading by candlelight. He is not dreaming of power. He is dreaming of peace. He is hoping his country will remember the power of patience, learning, and compromise. Because Millard Fillmore believed that unity is built by ordinary people doing their quiet part, even when the noise of history is deafening. Franklin Pierce, The Handsome Tragedy. On a crisp autumn morning, November 23, 1804, in a small town called Hillsborough, New Hampshire, a baby boy opened his eyes to the world. His name was Franklin Pierce, and though no seer could have foretold it, he would one day become the 14th President of the United States. He was the son of Benjamin Pierce, a Revolutionary War veteran and twice governor of New Hampshire. The Pierce household was firm but nurturing, full of duty and service to the Republic. Young Franklin was charming, gentle, and well-liked. He had a kind smile, a glimmer in his eye, and a softness in his soul. He studied at Bowdoin College, where he roomed with the future writer Nathaniel Hawthorne, forming a lifelong friendship. His classmates noted his warmth, wit, and ability, to win hearts with his speeches. Though blessed with charm and eloquence, his life would be shadowed by loss and sorrow. By his mid-20s, Pierce had already been elected to the New Hampshire legislature, then the U.S. House of Representatives, and later the Senate, the youngest member at the time. But despite his rapid political ascent, he remained humble and gentle in manner. He abhorred confrontation and believed deeply in the Union. He married Jane Means Appleton, the delicate religious daughter of a college president. Where Franklin was social and affable, Jane was shy and melancholy. Their love was tender but tragic. She hated politics and Washington's pomp. He loved her dearly and often sacrificed his ambitions to keep her happy. In 1842, he resigned from the Senate to return to New Hampshire and private law practice, prioritizing family over politics. But fate would not allow him to remain in the quiet hills for long. When war broke out with Mexico in 1846, Pierce volunteered to serve. President Polk appointed him a brigadier general. Though mocked by some as inexperienced, Pierce proved courageous in battle, leading troops in difficult terrain despite suffering a debilitating leg injury. He returned home with a hero's welcome, but his victories were personal, proof to himself and others that he was not merely charming, but brave. His name gained national prominence again, though he sought no glory. In 1852, at the Democratic National Convention, party leaders were deadlocked. After 48 ballots, they turned to a compromise. The unifying figure who offended few and charmed many. Franklin Pierce. He had been out of politics for a decade. He was largely unknown on the national stage. But his good looks, military service, and unblemished record made him the perfect dark horse. Running against the aging war hero Winfield Scott, Pierce campaigned on unity, peace, and democratic values. He won in a landslide. Just weeks before Inauguration Day, tragedy struck. Franklin, Jane, and their son Benjamin, the last of their 3 children, were traveling by train. A sudden derailment flung the train cars off the track. Young Benny was killed, decapitated before their eyes. Jane was devastated. She believed the presidency was a punishment from God and withdrew into mourning. Franklin was crushed. He entered the White House with a broken heart. Pierce's presidency began with great hope, but quickly unraveled. He supported the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which repealed the Missouri Compromise and allowed territories to decide the slavery issue through popular sovereignty. Pierce believed it would calm sectional tensions. Instead, it ignited violence, known as Bleeding Kansas, as pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers clashed. His administration's inability to quell the bloodshed eroded his popularity. He enforced the Fugitive Slave Act, angering Northern abolitionists, and his firm stance on maintaining Southern support cost him the trust of his party. He was called a doughface, a Northerner with Southern sympathies. His vision of union at all costs seemed blind to the growing moral crisis. In 1856, the Democrats abandoned Pierce and nominated James Buchanan instead. Franklin returned to New Hampshire a defeated and grieving man. He and Jane lived quietly. She remained in mourning until her death in 1863. Pierce never recovered from losing his sons, his wife, and his reputation. When the Civil War broke out, he opposed secession but criticized Lincoln's wartime powers. Old allies turned away. Once a beloved orator and friend to presidents, he became a lonely relic of a bygone era. His drinking increased. His correspondence with Nathaniel Hawthorne remained one of his few comforts. Franklin Pierce died on October 8, 1869, at the age of 64, in Concord, New Hampshire. His passing received little fanfare. His presidency was remembered as a cautionary tale. Yet even in failure there was depth to his struggle. A man caught between love and duty, torn by national division and ultimately overwhelmed by sorrow. Franklin Pierce's name rarely graces the lists of great presidents. He is remembered more for what he did not do, for the crisis he could not stop, and the peace he could not preserve. But behind the disappointment was a man who believed deeply in the Union, who loved his family fiercely, and wanted healing more than power. Perhaps he was not built for the stormy world of 1850s politics. Perhaps he was a man too gentle, too grieving for a nation approaching war. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, picture a quiet room in a New Hampshire home. A man sits alone by the fire, a letter from an old friend in one hand, a glass in the other. He is not plotting power, he is remembering a little boy with a bright smile, a wife's gentle laugh, a country that once felt whole. Because Franklin Pierce believed in unity more than politics and in peace more than pride, he became a portrait of sorrow in a time of fury. James Buchanan, The Bachelor in the Storm. On April 23, 1791, in a log cabin in Cove Gap, Pennsylvania, a baby boy was born to a frontier merchant and farmer. His name was James Buchanan, and he would grow to be a man of polished manners, legal brilliance, and complex contradictions. The only bachelor president in American history, and the last to lead before the firestorm of civil war. Raised in a prosperous Scotch-Irish family, Buchanan studied at Dickinson College, where he earned a reputation for both mischief and intellect. After graduating and studying law, he opened a successful practice in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and soon became one of the state's most respected attorneys. But Buchanan's life would never be confined to the courtroom. Politics whispered in his ear early, and he answered the call. Buchanan entered the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in his 20s, and then moved quickly to the U.S. House of Representatives, serving 10 years as a Federalist-turned-Democrat. He was elegant, persuasive, and meticulous, a man who valued law, order, and diplomacy above all. Tall, courtly, and ever impeccably dressed, Buchanan became a fixture in Washington. He was engaged once to Ann Coleman, but their relationship ended in heartbreak. Anne died soon after, and Buchanan never married, dedicating himself wholly to public service. Over the next decades, Buchanan served as Minister to Russia under Andrew Jackson, United States Senator from Pennsylvania, Secretary of State under James K. Polk, where he helped oversee the resolution of the Oregon boundary dispute and supported the Mexican-American War. In 1853, President Franklin Pierce appointed him Minister to Great Britain, where Buchanan helped negotiate the controversial Ostend Manifesto, advocating for the U.S. acquisition of Cuba. The document later sparked fierce backlash. But Buchanan's time abroad kept him clear of the growing political chaos at home, something his supporters would use to their advantage. By 1856, America was tearing at the seams over slavery, territorial expansion, and state sovereignty. Buchanan's long resume, moderate stance, and absence from the Kansas-Nebraska debates made him an ideal Democratic candidate. He ran against Republican John C. Fremont and former President Millard Fillmore, winning the presidency with support from the South and Northern Democrats. He would become the 15th President of the United States, inheriting a union fraught with tension. From the beginning, Buchanan sought to be a constitutional steward, believing that compromise and law would hold the nation together. But his efforts often appeased the South while alienating the North. He supported the pro-slavery Lecompton Constitution in Kansas, despite obvious corruption in the process. He believed slavery was a matter for the states and territories to decide, not the federal government. Then came the infamous Dred Scott decision, in which the Supreme Court ruled that African Americans were not citizens, and that Congress had no right to prohibit slavery in the territories. Buchanan had pressured the court behind the scenes, a breach of executive impartiality that damaged his credibility. During Buchanan's final year in office, the crisis deepened. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry shocked the nation. The Democratic Party splintered along sectional lines. Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860 without a single Southern state. One by one, Southern states seceded from the Union. Buchanan, paralyzed by legalism, declared secession illegal, but also claimed the federal government had no authority to stop it. He did nothing to stop the seizure of federal forts, arsenals, and navy yards across the South. As the Union fractured, Buchanan insisted the Constitution offered no remedy but patience. In March 1861, Buchanan handed the presidency to Abraham Lincoln. As he departed the White House, he is said to have told his successor, "If you are as happy in entering the presidency as I am in leaving it, you are a very happy man." He returned to Wheatland, his Pennsylvania estate, where he spent the rest of his life writing his memoirs and defending his legacy. He died on June 1st, 1868, a year after the end of the Civil War. James Buchanan is often ranked among America's least effective presidents, blamed for his failure to act during the most critical moment in the Union's history. And yet he was not a man of malice. He was a man of law, trained in diplomacy, who believed compromise could cure any wound. But the nation needed courage, not caution. It needed vision, not delay. His tragedy was not his intent, it was his inaction. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, imagine a grand estate in Pennsylvania. Its halls lined with books, its study aglow with candlelight. A white-haired man sits at a desk, pen in hand, trying to explain what went wrong. He was no tyrant, no villain, just a man who could not stop a rising tide. Because James Buchanan believed the Constitution could hold back the storm, he waited for peace while war marched in. Abraham Lincoln, the emancipator's light. On a quiet Sunday morning, February 12, 1809, in a single-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky, a child was born who would one day redefine freedom for a nation. His name was Abraham Lincoln, and from the humblest of beginnings, he would rise to become the 16th President of the United States, and one of its most beloved. He was the son of Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln, frontier farmers of modest means. Life was hard. The family moved often, eventually settling in Indiana and later Illinois. Lincoln's mother died when he was 9, leaving a tender scar that never truly healed. He had less than a year of formal schooling, yet devoured every book he could find. The Bible, Shakespeare, and law books shaped a mind sharpened not in halls of academia, but under oil lamps in the wilderness. Tall, gangly, and awkward, he became known for his quick wit, deep melancholy, and uncanny wisdom. As a young man, Lincoln worked as a rail splitter, store clerk, postmaster, and surveyor, slowly building his reputation in New Salem and then Springfield, Illinois. He studied law on his own, passed the bar in 1836, and began practicing in Springfield. He traveled the circuit courts by horseback, becoming known as a compelling storyteller, a sharp legal mind, and a man of absolute honesty, earning the nickname Honest Abe. In 1842, he married Mary Todd, a sharp-witted woman from a wealthy Kentucky family. Their marriage was often fiery, but full of affection. They would have 4 sons, though only one, Robert, would survive into adulthood. Lincoln served in the Illinois state legislature as a member of the Whig Party, and later won a term in Congress. He opposed the Mexican-American War and denounced the spread of slavery. But his views weren't yet radical. For a time, he returned to law, his political future uncertain. Then came the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, allowing slavery to expand into new territories. Lincoln was horrified. He returned to politics with new purpose, helping to build the Republican Party, founded on opposing slavery's expansion. He wasn't an abolitionist in the strict sense, but he believed slavery was morally wrong and politically corrosive. Then came 1858 and the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates. Challenging Senator Stephen A. Douglas, Lincoln engaged in a series of debates across Illinois, dazzling audiences with his moral clarity and sharp rhetoric. "A house divided against itself cannot stand," he declared. "I believe this government cannot endure, permanently half slave and half free." He lost the Senate race, but won national fame. In 1860, he secured the Republican nomination for president and won the general election, defeating a fractured Democratic field. The South saw his election as a threat. Even before his inauguration, 7 states seceded. Abraham Lincoln entered the White House in March 1861 with the nation already unraveling. In April, Fort Sumter was attacked. The Civil War had begun. Lincoln was an unlikely war president. No military background, no battlefield experience. but he proved to be a master strategist, choosing commanders carefully after many mistakes, managing public opinion, and expanding executive powers. He faced criticism from all sides. Too slow to act, too fast to act, too radical, not radical enough. Yet through it all, he remained steady. He read poetry when alone, paced the White House with sorrow, and buried 2 of his children while in office. Yet he carried the weight of a dying and rebirthing nation. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves in Confederate-held territories were free. It didn't end slavery entirely. That would take a constitutional amendment, but it transformed the war into a moral crusade and allowed black soldiers to join the Union Army. "If my name ever goes into history," he said, "it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." It was the boldest step of his presidency. In November 1863, Lincoln traveled to a battlefield in Pennsylvania to dedicate a cemetery. There, in just 272 words, he gave the Gettysburg Address, a speech that redefined American democracy. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The war dragged on, bloody and uncertain, but Lincoln remained committed to reunion and mercy, refusing to demonize the South. In 1864, Lincoln was re-elected amidst exhaustion and loss. His second term began with hope. General Ulysses S. Grant was closing in on victory, and Lincoln spoke of reconciliation. "With malice toward none, with charity for all, let us bind up the nation's wounds." On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox. The war was over. Just 5 days later, on April 14th, Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theatre. He was shot by actor and Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth. He died the next morning. Lincoln's death stunned the world. His funeral train wound through cities where millions mourned. He was not just a president. He had become a symbol of unity, sacrifice, and the promise of America. He preserved the Union. He ended slavery. He redefined liberty. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, imagine a tall figure walking slowly through the White House, reading Shakespeare under candlelight, grief in his eyes but iron in his soul. Picture him leaning over the desk to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, not as a gesture, but as a rebirth of the nation's soul. Picture him in a crowd at Gettysburg, uttering words that still echo across centuries. Because Abraham Lincoln believed in the better angels of our nature, and by doing so he helped save a broken country. Andrew Johnson, the tailor in turmoil. On December 29, 1808, in a small log cabin in Raleigh, North Carolina, a baby boy was born into hardship. His name was Andrew Johnson, and he would rise from poverty and illiteracy to become the 17th President of the United States. His father died when Andrew was just 3 years old. His mother, a washerwoman, struggled to support the family. At 10, Johnson was apprenticed to a tailor and never received a formal education. But he was sharp, observant, and driven. As he sewed coats and trousers, he listened to political debates and absorbed the voices of the people. By sheer determination, he taught himself to read. His wife, Eliza McCardle, helped him improve his writing and speaking. They built a quiet life in Greenville, Tennessee, where he opened his own tailor shop and eventually entered politics. Johnson rose quickly in Tennessee politics, becoming a mayor, state legislator, U.S. congressman, and eventually governor of Tennessee. He was a populist before the term existed, championing small farmers, mechanics, and the working class. He opposed elite planters and viewed slavery as a system that oppressed poor whites as well as enslaved black Americans, though he himself was a slaveholder for much of his life. In 1857 he entered the U.S. Senate, and though a Democrat from the South, he remained loyal to the Union as the Civil War loomed. When Tennessee seceded, Johnson was the only Southern senator who refused to leave the Senate. For this, Lincoln admired him. During the Civil War, Johnson was appointed military governor of Tennessee, working to restore order and protect Union sympathizers. In 1864, Lincoln, seeking to unify the North and South, chose Johnson as his vice president on the National Union ticket. A bold move, pairing a Southern Democrat with a Northern Republican. The ticket won. But just weeks into their second term, tragedy struck. On April 14, 1865, President Lincoln was assassinated. The next morning, Andrew Johnson was sworn in. Johnson inherited a nation in ruins, its heart torn out by war and assassination. But Johnson was no Lincoln. He sought quick restoration of the southern states, offering leniency to former Confederates and opposing efforts to protect the rights of newly freed slaves. He vetoed key civil rights legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and bills establishing the Freedmen's Bureau. Congress overrode his vetoes, marking the first time in U.S. history that major legislation passed over a president's objections. Johnson's presidency became a war, not with foreign powers, but with Congress itself. The radical Republicans in Congress, led by men like Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner, believed Johnson was undermining Reconstruction and enabling Southern resistance. When Johnson tried to remove Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, a violation of the newly passed Tenure of Office Act, Congress had enough. In 1868, Johnson became the first president to be impeached. The impeachment trial in the Senate was a national spectacle. Johnson was accused of violating the Tenure of Office Act, but the deeper issue was his defiance of Congress and obstruction of Reconstruction. He was acquitted by one vote. A single Republican senator, Edmund G. Ross, broke ranks believing the trial was politically motivated. Johnson remained in office, but his power was shattered. After his term ended in 1869, Johnson returned to Greenville. He tried to stay involved in politics, unsuccessfully running for the Senate and House. Finally, in 1875, he was elected to the U.S. Senate, becoming the only former president to return to the Senate. He served just a few months before dying of a stroke on July 31st, 1875. Andrew Johnson is remembered as a president who resisted progress at a critical moment. He valued states' rights over civil rights, and his obstruction of Reconstruction delayed justice and equality for millions. And yet he was also a man of perseverance, who rose from nothing, remained loyal in a time of betrayal, and stood firm in his beliefs, however flawed. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, picture a man bent over a needle and thread, sewing coats for farmers and preachers, listening to voices that echoed into history. Picture him sitting alone in a smoky room, torn between past and future, struggling to understand the country he tried to lead. Because Andrew Johnson believed in mending a broken union, but lacked the vision to make it whole. Ulysses S. Grant, the Quiet General. On April 27, 1822, in the river town of Point Pleasant, Ohio, a quiet boy named Hiram Ulysses Grant was born. Later, through a bureaucratic mix-up at West Point, he would become known to history as Ulysses S. Grant, a name that would be etched into both the battlefield and the presidency. He was the son of Jesse and Hannah Grant, raised with strong values of hard work, humility, and perseverance. Young Ulysses preferred horses to books, solitude to society. He was gentle, reserved, and had no dreams of greatness. At age 17, he received an appointment to West Point. He didn't want to go, but he went. And though he never excelled academically, he was an extraordinary horseman, known for his calm courage and quiet resolve. After graduation, Grant served with distinction in the Mexican-American War under General Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott, gaining valuable military experience but developing a lifelong distaste for war. He married Julia Dent, a Southern woman from a slave-holding family with whom he shared a tender, enduring love. They would raise 4 children together. But peacetime proved difficult. Posted to remote forts and separated from his family, Grant struggled with depression and alcohol, a battle he would quietly face throughout his life. In 1854, he resigned from the army. Over the next few years, he failed at farming, real estate, and business. By 1860, he was working in his father's leather goods store in Galena, Illinois, humble and nearly forgotten. Then came civil war. When the war began in 1861, Grant offered his services to the Union. Appointed colonel and soon brigadier general, he quickly earned a reputation for action and determination. His first major victory came at Fort Donelson in Tennessee, where he demanded unconditional surrender, a phrase that captured the public's imagination and earned him the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant. At Shiloh, he faced fierce criticism for heavy casualties, but refused to be shaken. His belief: wars are not won by timidity. President Lincoln saw something rare in Grant, a man who fought and did not complain. While other generals hesitated, Grant moved forward. In 1863, Grant orchestrated one of the most brilliant campaigns of the war, the Siege of Vicksburg. It gave the Union control of the Mississippi River and split the Confederacy in two. Lincoln rewarded Grant by placing him in command of all Union armies. Grant moved east, facing off against Robert E. Lee in a brutal campaign of attrition. Battles like the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor were bloody and indecisive, but Grant pressed on. He besieged Petersburg and slowly strangled the Confederate supply lines. Finally, on April 9, 1865, Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. Grant's terms were generous. He allowed Confederate soldiers to return home with their horses and sidearms. The war is over. The rebels are our countrymen again. Grant returned home a national hero, celebrated with parades and songs. He had saved the Union and was widely admired for his humility, calm leadership, and quiet strength. In 1868, with the nation still healing, the Republican Party nominated him for president. His campaign slogan was simple: "Let us have peace." He won decisively, becoming the 18th President of the United States. Grant's presidency was shaped by the struggle to rebuild the South and protect the rights of formerly enslaved people. He supported the 15th Amendment, granting black men the right to vote, and used federal troops to fight the Ku Klux Klan. He created the Department of Justice, signed the Civil Rights Act of 1875, and appointed African Americans and Jewish Americans to government posts. But his presidency was also marred by corruption scandals. Grant himself was personally honest, but many of his appointees were not. The whiskey ring, credit mobilia, and other scandals stained his administration. Despite these failures, Grant remained deeply loyal, sometimes to a fault. After leaving office in 1877, Grant and Julia took a world tour, welcomed by kings, queens, and emperors. He was treated like a global celebrity, admired for leading his country through its darkest days. But financial trouble awaited. In retirement, Grant trusted the wrong people and was swindled in a Ponzi scheme, losing his entire fortune. Soon after, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. Facing death and poverty, he began writing his memoirs, an extraordinary account of his life and military career. He finished them just days before he died, ensuring financial security for Julia. He died on July 23, 1885, and was mourned as a national treasure. Grant's reputation rose and fell with time. For years, he was remembered primarily for the scandals of his presidency. But in recent decades, historians have come to admire him as a civil rights champion, a stabilizing force, and a remarkably humble leader. He was not a brilliant speaker, nor a political tactician. He was a man who acted when others faltered, who stood firm when others wavered. He fought not for glory, but to hold the Union together, and to ensure liberty for all. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, picture a man in a dusty blue coat, standing beneath the red and white stripes of a worn battle flag. He does not speak much. He writes. He rides. He remembers. He leads not with flash or fury, but with steady resolve. because Ulysses S. Grant believed in peace through perseverance, and by holding the line, he helped a wounded nation find its way. Rutherford B. Hayes, the Gentleman of Compromise. On October 4, 1822, in Delaware, Ohio, a baby boy was born to Sophia Burchard Hayes, just 10 weeks after the death of her husband. She named him Rutherford Burchard Hayes, and from the very beginning he lived in the shadow of both absence and resilience. Sophia raised Rutherford and his sister with quiet strength and fierce independence. She read to them often, nurturing a love of books and a strong moral compass. Rutherford grew up bright, thoughtful and soft-spoken, traits that would define his adult life. He studied at Kenyon College, where he graduated as valedictorian and later earned a law degree from Harvard. He returned to Ohio to build a life as a lawyer, respected for his intellect and integrity. He married Lucy Ware Webb, an educated and principled woman who would become the first Lady to hold a college degree. Together they raised 8 children, 3 of whom survived to adulthood, and shared a deep commitment to abolitionism, temperance, and reform. When the Civil War broke out, Hayes didn't hesitate. Though nearly 40 and a father of young children, he volunteered for the Union Army and quickly rose to the rank of Brigadier General. He was wounded multiple times, most seriously at South Mountain, where he continued leading his men even after being shot through the arm. His bravery earned him the loyalty of his troops and the admiration of his peers. After the war, Hayes entered politics. He served as a U.S. congressman and then as governor of Ohio, earning a reputation as a moderate reformer. He was praised for his honesty, his advocacy for public education, and his efforts to support African American rights in the post-war years. In 1876, the Republican Party nominated Hayes for president, an uncontroversial, honest man, at a time of widespread political fatigue and scandal. His opponent was Democrat Samuel J. Tilden, a reform-minded governor from New York. The election was one of the most disputed in American history. Tilden won the popular vote, but 20 electoral votes from 4 states were in dispute. After weeks of confusion, backroom negotiations, and a special electoral commission, a deal was struck. The Compromise of 1877. In exchange for Hayes becoming president, Republicans agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South, effectively ending Reconstruction. Rutherford B. Hayes was inaugurated in secret on March 3, 1877, under heavy guard. Though born of compromise, Hayes's presidency was guided by integrity and idealism. He believed in equal rights, civil service reform, and healing a divided nation. He ended Reconstruction, believing the South could be reconciled through good faith, a belief later proven tragically naive. Fought against political patronage, reforming the civil service, and paving the way for the later Pendleton Act. Supported education for Black Americans and spoke openly about the need for racial justice, even as federal enforcement dwindled. Refused to seek a second term, staying true to his promise of serving only one. Hayes was often criticized for being too passive, too idealistic. But he governed with deep conviction and unshakable ethics. After leaving office in 1881, Hayes retired to his estate, Spiegel Grove, in Fremont, Ohio. But retirement didn't mean rest. He dedicated his time to promoting education, particularly for black students and those in the South, supporting prison reform, advocating for rehabilitation over punishment, championing temperance and civic responsibility. He was appointed to various education boards and philanthropic organizations, quietly continuing the work he believed in. He and Lucy, his lifelong partner in both heart and principle, remained devoted until her death in 1889. Hayes followed her 4 years later, passing away on January 17, 1893. Rutherford B. Hayes is rarely listed among America's most famous presidents. His name doesn't inspire monuments or dramatic legends. But his life was a model of modesty, service, and moral courage. He was a man who believed in doing the right thing, not the flashy thing. He sought to restore trust in the presidency, to soften the scars of war, and to guide a fractured nation back toward hope. As you close your eyes and drift into dreams, picture a man walking through quiet woods in Ohio. His hand in his wife's, his thoughts on children learning in schools he helped build. He smiles softly, not because he was celebrated, but because he served. Because Rutherford B. Hayes believed that leadership was not about power, but about purpose.